The stars looked different from the bridge of the infinite horizon. Giwan stood at the viewport, watching the twin suns of the Talvos prime system grow larger with each passing hour. She had spent 45 years preparing for moments like this. But nothing in her career had prepared her for what lay ahead. The message from the Galactic Council still burned in her memory, every word dripping with contempt. The newcomers will present themselves for evaluation, it had said. As if humanity were children asking permission to sit at the adults' table, Captain Minho approached from behind. His footsteps deliberate and measured. He was a military man through and through, uncomfortable with the politics and pleasantries that define Jiwan's world. "We'll be in docking range within 3 hours," he said, his voice flat. "My tactical team has analyzed their station defenses. If things go wrong, we won't make it out." Giwan didn't turn from the viewport. "Things won't go wrong, you don't know that." Minho stepped beside her, following her gaze to the massive ring station that now dominated the view. It was larger than any human construction, a monument to civilizations that had mastered space travel before humanity learned to make fire. "They invited us here to put us in our place. Every species that's joined the Council in the last 1,000 years became a servant. We're walking into a trap." Laughter echoed through the chamber, translated into sounds that made Jiwan's skin crawl. She waited, knowing the presentation wasn't finished. True to her expectation, the display shifted once more, this time showing humanity's current political state. The divided nations, the competing factions, the endless debates and disagreements that characterized human governance. Earth had achieved a fragile peace, but it was far from unified. "You cannot even agree among yourselves," Velmuth observed. 312 separate nations on one small planet. Dozens of languages, hundreds of religions, thousands of cultural divisions. The inefficiency is staggering. My species achieved unity within a millennium of achieving sapience. Yours has existed for over 200,000 years and still fragments itself over trivial differences. Warmatron Cross made a sound that Jiwan's earpiece translated as contemptuous amusement. Soft bodies, soft minds. Look at them. Covered in fragile skin, requiring constant nourishment and rest. They die if their atmosphere is slightly wrong, if their temperature varies too much, if they go too long without water. They are prey animals that learn to use tools, nothing more. The galaxy is no place for such weakness. The mockery continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Each council member took their turn, pointing out humanity's flaws with varying degrees of cruelty or pity. Some seemed genuinely disgusted by what they saw. Others appeared bored, as if this ritual of humiliation was merely a formality they had performed countless times before. Throughout it all, Jiwan stood silent and still, her face an impassive mask. Finally, the presentation ended. The holographic displays faded, leaving Jiwan alone once more on her platform in the center of the chamber. High Arbiter Velmuth's crystalline structure refracted the chamber's light as it addressed her directly. "You have heard the Council's assessment of your species, human. Do you dispute these facts? Can you deny what we have shown?" This was the moment. Jiwan took a breath and spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "No, High Arbiter. I don't dispute any of it." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant ambient sounds of alien respiration and movement seemed to cease. Velmuth's light patterns flickered, something that might have been surprise. "You acknowledge your species' failings?" "I do," Guan said calmly. "Humanity is young. We have fought terrible wars. We have damaged our world. We are divided by language, culture, and belief. We are physically fragile compared to many of you. Every fact you presented is accurate. I won't waste the Council's time with denial or excuses." Warmatron Cross leaned forward on her platform. "Then you admit you are unworthy of joining civilized space." "I didn't say that," Giwan replied. She paused, letting the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. "I said, I acknowledge our past. But I noticed the Council spent a great deal of time discussing humanity's history and very little time discussing yours. So I have a question, if the Council permits." Velmuth's light patterns stabilized. "Ask your question." Guan looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or eye equivalents of as many representatives as she could. In your 12,000 years of unity, what have you accomplished? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Velmuth's lights pulsed rapidly, a sign that Hyjin had identified as irritation. We have accomplished more than your species can imagine, human. We have eliminated war among member species. We have eradicated poverty and disease within our territories. We have built wonders that dwarf your greatest achievements. I don't doubt it, Juan said. Your presentation showed me images of those wonders. Magnificent constructions, impressive technology, remarkable achievements. But I noticed something interesting about those images. Would the council mind showing them again? Velmuth hesitated, then gestured. The holographic displays returned, cycling through the council's greatest accomplishments. Terraformed worlds, massive space stations, ships capable of crossing the galaxy in mere days. Guan watched them for a moment, then spoke again. Hi, Arbiter. Could you tell me when the newest of these achievements was completed? The chamber's silence deepened. Velmuth's lights dimmed slightly. The Celestial Ring Station was completed 4,217 years ago. And before that? Guan pressed gently. Another council member answered, a gaseous being whose voice bubbled through Guan's translator. The terraforming of the Nexus worlds. 7,800 years ago. Juan nodded slowly. So if I understand correctly, your most recent major achievement is over 4,000 years old, and your greatest period of construction and innovation occurred between 8 and 12,000 years ago. Since then, she trailed off, letting the implication speak for itself. We have maintained peace and stability, Velmuth said, its voice harder now. We have governed wisely and justly. You've governed, Guan agreed. But have you grown? Have you explored? Have you pushed boundaries? I asked to see your exploration records earlier. May I see them now? Velmuth made a gesture that caused new displays to appear, showing maps of council territory. Guan studied them carefully, comparing different time periods. This is your territory 8,000 years ago, and this is your territory now. They're nearly identical. In 8 millennia, you've expanded by less than 3%. We have no need for reckless expansion, Sage Loomis interjected. Its energy form glowing with what might have been defensiveness. We have everything our civilizations require. Perhaps, Guan said. She turned to face Loomis directly. Or perhaps you've become comfortable, safe, risk-averse. You mock humanity for being young and chaotic. But youth and chaos drive innovation. They force adaptation. They demand growth. She gestured to the council chamber around her. You've created a stable system, I'll give you that. But stability isn't the same as progress. And from what I've seen, the Galactic Council stopped progressing a very long time ago. War Matron Cross rose from her platform, her massive form intimidating even at a distance. You dare suggest we are stagnant? We who have mastered technologies your kind cannot begin to comprehend. I suggest, Guan said carefully, that you've mastered the technologies your ancestors developed. Yes. But what have you developed? What problems have you solved that they couldn't? What new frontiers have you reached? She paused, then added quietly, what was the last time any of you took a real risk? The chamber erupted in angry voices, dozens of alien languages overlapping as council members shouted over each other. Guan stood calmly at the center of the storm, waiting. She had lit the fuse. Now she would see how the council responded when someone finally challenged their assumptions about themselves. High Arbiter Velmuth's voice cut through the chaos, commanding silence. When the chamber quieted, its lights pulsed with barely contained fury. You are bold human, foolishly so. You stand before civilizations that were ancient when your species was learning to hunt with stone tools, and you lecture us about progress. Velmuth's crystalline body seemed to grow larger, though Guan knew it was probably an optical illusion. Very well. You wish to prove humanity's worth? Then prove it. The tension in the Grand Chamber was thick enough to cut. Guan stood on her platform, very aware that she had just insulted the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. but she also knew she had struck a nerve. The Council's angry reaction told her everything she needed to know. They were uncomfortable because she was right. High Arbiter Velmuth's crystalline form pulsed with angry light. You claim humanity's chaos and youth are strengths. You suggest the Council has grown complacent? These are bold claims from a species that has barely left its own solar system. Words are easy, human. Action is what matters. I agree completely, Juan said, keeping her voice level. So what action do you propose? Warmatron Cross descended from her platform, her massive insectoid form moving with surprising grace. She stopped at the edge of Giwan's smaller platform, looming over the human diplomat. Up close, she was even more intimidating, her armored exoskeleton gleaming in the chamber's light. A test. You will face a challenge that the Council has attempted and failed to solve. If you succeed, we will grant Earth's full partnership status in the Council. If you fail, Earth will accept our governance as a protectorate world. Giwan felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression neutral. A protectorate world meant Earth would lose its independence, becoming little more than a colony of the Council. But backing down now would show weakness, and weakness was something the Council would exploit mercilessly. What are the terms of this challenge? Sage Loomis floated down from its platform, its energy form casting strange shadows. The challenge must be fair. We propose a humanitarian crisis, something that tests problem-solving ability rather than military might or technological superiority. Do you find these terms acceptable? That depends on the specifics, Juan replied. She noticed Hyjin in the observation gallery, frantically working on her datapad. Whatever was coming, Hyjin would gather as much information as possible. What exactly is this challenge? The holographic displays activated again, this time showing a star system that Giwan didn't recognize. 3 rocky planets orbited a yellow star, and one of those planets was highlighted in red. This is the Korvath system, Velmoth explained. 52 years ago, a species called the Navari fled to this system as refugees from a plague that devastated their homeworld. 3 billion Navari currently live on Korvath 3, quarantined and dying. The display zoomed in on Korvath 3, showing crowded settlements and failing infrastructure. Giwan watched as the data scrolled past, her mind already processing the implications. What kind of plague? A biosynthetic weapon from an ancient war, a smaller council member answered. Juwan recognized the species as the Tyvari, one of the vassal races Hyjin had identified. It was designed to resist treatment, to adapt to any cure. The Council has attempted 17 different solutions over the past 5 decades. All have failed. So you quarantine them, Giwan said quietly. You sealed the system and let them die. We had no choice, Velmuth said, though its lights dimmed slightly. The plague is too dangerous to risk spreading. If it escaped Korvath, it could kill billions across the galaxy. The quarantine is maintained by automated defense platforms. No ship enters or leaves without Council authorization. Giwan studied the display, her mind racing. 3 billion lives abandoned because the Council couldn't solve the problem. It was exactly what Hyjin had warned her about. When faced with a truly difficult challenge, the Council chose the safe option, contain it and move on. And you want humanity to solve this? To cure a plague that has defeated your best scientists for 50 years? We want you to try, Sage Loomis said, its tone almost gentle. If you succeed in saving the Navari within 1 standard month, Earth will be welcomed as a full partner in the Council. You will have equal status, equal vote, equal voice. No probation, no protectorate status. And if we fail? Juwan asked, though she already knew the answer. Warmatron Cross clicked her mandibles. If you fail, Earth accepts Council governance. We will guide your species, control your expansion, direct your development. You will be protected, provided for, and prevented from causing harm to yourselves or others. It is more than you deserve, but we are not without mercy. Mean we become servants, Juwan said flatly. Like the other vassal species you've absorbed over the centuries. The chamber fell silent again. Several of the smaller council members shifted uncomfortably, confirming what Juwan had suspected. The vassal species knew exactly what their status meant, but none dared speak against the dominant powers. War Matron Cross leaned closer, her voice low and threatening. Choose your words carefully, human. We offer you a chance to prove yourselves. Take it or refuse it, but do not insult this council's generosity. Giwan met the War Matron's multifaceted eyes without flinching. Her mind worked through the scenarios, calculating risks and possibilities. This was a trap, obviously. The council expected humanity to fail, expected to use that failure as justification for taking control of Earth. But it was also an opportunity. If humanity could succeed where the council had failed, it would shake the entire power structure. It would prove that the old ways weren't the only ways, that new perspectives could solve old problems. I need to consult with my team, Giwan said finally, and I need access to all the council's research on the Corvette situation. Complete records, nothing held back. Velmuth's lights pulsed in what might have been satisfaction. Of course. We have nothing to hide. You will have full access to our databases. Take one of your hours to consult with your people. Then return here with your answer. Giwan descended from her platform and walked toward the observation gallery where Haijin waited. The chamber remained silent as she left, every council member watching her departure. She could feel the weight of their attention, their expectations of her failure. Let them watch. Let them expect. She had survived 45 years of diplomatic games by never giving her opponents what they anticipated. Haijin met her outside the chamber, her face pale. Guan, this is insane. They're setting you up to fail. The Navari situation has been studied by the greatest minds in the galaxy for 50 years. What makes them think we can solve it in 1 month? They don't think we can, Juan replied as they walked quickly down the corridor. That's the point. They want us to try and fail so they can justify taking control of Earth. The vassal species will see it as proof that the Council knows best, that resistance is futile. And why are you considering accepting? Haijin demanded. We should refuse the challenge, leave this place, and prepare Earth for what's coming. We need time to build defenses, to strengthen our position. Guan stopped walking and turned to face her friend. And how much time do you think they'll give us? A year? 2? The moment we refuse this challenge, we confirm everything they believe about humanity. That we're all talk, no action. That we're cowards who run when things get difficult. The Council will come for Earth eventually, Haijin. At least this way, we have a chance to meet them on our terms. A chance to fail spectacularly, you mean, Haijin said, but her voice had softened. She knew Ji-Wan well enough to recognize when a decision had already been made. They reached this infinite horizon and headed straight for the briefing room. Captain Minho was already there along with his senior staff. He looked up as they entered, his expression grim. I've been monitoring the council session. They've backed you into a corner, No Giwan said, moving to the central display table. They've given us an opportunity. Haijin, pull up everything you can find on the Navarian Korvath system. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Jiwan Minho said carefully. You can't seriously be thinking of accepting this challenge. It's a suicide mission. The Council has had 50 years and unlimited resources to solve this problem. What can we do in 1 month? Something they can't, Juan replied. She activated the display, pulling up the initial data on Korvath. The Council approaches problems from a position of caution and control. They're afraid of making mistakes, of taking risks that might backfire. 50 years ago they had a choice. Risk spreading the plague by aggressive intervention, or seal the system and let the Navari die slowly. They chose the safe option. That's what makes them predictable, Haijin said, understanding dawning on her face. They won't try anything radical. They won't take chances. But we will. We'll have to, Jiwan confirmed. She looked around at the assembled officers. I know this is dangerous. I know the odds are against us. But 3 billion lives are at stake. The Navari have been dying for 50 years while the Council debates and studies. If we can save them, we prove that humanity deserves a place in the galaxy. And if we can't, paused. If we can't, at least we tried. Minho was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You'll need more than my ship. We'll need medical personnel, scientists, engineers. The Infinite Horizon wasn't designed for a mission like this. Then we'll adapt it, Joanne said. We'll call for volunteers from Earth. Anyone who wants to help. Anyone who believes this is worth the risk. We have 1 month to save 3 billion lives and secure humanity's future. Let's see what we can do. Haijin pulled up more data, her fingers flying across the interface. The Council's research is comprehensive. They've tried direct antiviral treatments, immune system boosters, genetic modification, even experimental nanotechnology. Nothing worked because the plague adapts faster than they can develop countermeasures. Then we won't try to kill the plague, Juan said, an idea forming in her mind. We'll find another way. There's always another way. The Council just stopped looking for it. An hour later, Giwan returned to the Grand Chamber. The Council representatives were Ting, their attention focused on her as she climbed back onto the supplicant's platform. High Arbiter Velmuth spoke first. Have you made your decision, human? Giwan stood tall, her voice clear and strong. I have. Humanity accepts your challenge. We will go to Corveth. We will save the Navari, and we will do it in less than 1 month. The chamber erupted in sound, some surprised, some amused, some perhaps even impressed by her confidence. War Matron Cross rose from her platform. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Time will tell which. The Council will provide you with a small medical frigate and basic supplies. Nothing more. If you require additional resources, you must bring them from Earth. That's acceptable, Jiwan said. She looked around at the assembled council, meeting as many eyes as she could. And when we succeed, I expect this council to honor its word. Full partnership. No conditions. Sage Loomis glowed brighter. If you succeed, human, you will have earned far more than partnership. You will have accomplished what we could not. That alone will change everything. The journey to Corveth took 3 days, and every hour of that time was spent in preparation. The Council had provided a medical frigate called the Nightingale, utilitarian vessel equipped with basic medical facilities but little else. Captain Minho brought the Infinite Horizon alongside it. And together the 2 ships made their way toward the quarantine system. Behind them, a supply ship from Earth raced to catch up. Carrying volunteers and equipment, G1 stood in the Nightingale's medical bay. Watching as the new arrivals settled in, Dr. Suho had been the first to volunteer when Earth received word of the mission. He was a thin man in his 50s with wild gray hair and an intensity that made people uncomfortable. He had spent 30 years studying diseases that others had declared incurable, and he thrived on impossible challenges. 3 billion patients in 1 month to save them, he muttered, reviewing the Council's research on his datapad. They weren't kidding when they said this would be difficult. This plague is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Whoever designed it was a genius. A genocidal genius, Juwan corrected, moving to stand beside him. Can we cure it? Suho made a non-committal sound. Cure it. No, the Council was right about that. This thing adapts too quickly. Every treatment they tried, it evolved past within days. It's like fighting smoke. You can't grab it, can't pin it down. He looked up at her with gleaming eyes. But we don't need to cure it. We just need to keep the Navari alive long enough for their own immune systems to adapt. The Council tried immune system boosters, Haijin said from across the room. She had been reviewing the same research for days. They failed. Because they used Council biology as a baseline, Suho said, his excitement growing. They tried to strengthen the Navari immune response using the same basic principles that work for Valthara or Krillians or Photari. But those species evolved in relatively stable environments. Their immune systems are specialized, efficient, optimized for specific threats. Juwan felt a spark of hope. But humans are different. Humans are chaos. Suho agreed with something close to affection. We evolved on a death world. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, prions, you name it. Earth threw everything at us. Our immune systems are generalists. We're not optimized for any particular threat because we had to deal with all of them. And that means we have genetic sequences for immune responses that other species never developed. Engineer Dayon entered the medical bay, her work suit stained with grease. She had spent the last 2 days modifying the Nightingale's systems for what came next. The fabrication systems are ready, she reported. We can produce the compounds once Dr. Suho finalizes the formula. But I need to be clear about something. The volume we need to produce is enormous. 3 billion patients means we need millions of doses. Even with both ships working at full capacity, it'll take weeks. We don't have weeks, Minho said from the doorway. He had been listening to the conversation. We have 27 days left. Less if anything goes wrong. Juan looked between her team members, seeing the same determination on each face. So we find a way to speed up the process. Dayon, what if we involved the Navari? Could they help manufacture the treatment? Dayon considered this, pulling up schematics on a nearby display. Maybe, if they have fabrication facilities on the planet, we could send them the formula and let them produce it locally. It would be faster than shipping everything from orbit. There's another problem, Hyjin said quietly. The Navari don't know us. We're aliens showing up 50 years into their quarantine, promising a cure that the Council couldn't provide. Why would they trust us? Because we're offering hope, Guan replied. And because I'm going to the planet's surface to talk to them directly? Minho pushed off from the doorway, his military training evident in every movement. Absolutely not. The plague is highly contagious. You go down there, you're exposing yourself to infection. We can't risk losing you. Can't risk losing their trust, Giwan countered. The Navari need to see that we're serious, that we're willing to take the same risks we're asking them to take. I go to the surface. I meet with their leaders face to face, and I convince them to work with us. It's a death sentence, Minho said flatly. Not if Suho's treatment works, Jiwan replied. She turned to the doctor. Does it work on humans? Suho hesitated. In theory, the compounds I'm developing should boost immune response across most carbon-based life forms. But I haven't tested it yet. There could be side effects. There could be complications. You'd be the first human trial. Then I'll be the first, Juan said with finality. Prepare the treatment. We reach Corveth in 6 hours. I want to be on the surface by nightfall. The Corveth system looked dead from space. The automated defense platforms that enforced the quarantine hung in orbit like metal tombstones. Their weapon systems tracking the infinite horizon and Nightingale as they approached. Captain Minho transmitted their council authorization codes, and slowly, grudgingly, the platforms allowed them to pass. Corveth 3 itself was a brown and gray world, its atmosphere thick with pollution from overcrowded settlements. 3 billion refugees had been packed onto a planet designed for perhaps half that number. As the Nightingale descended toward the surface, Giwan could see the sprawling camps that covered entire continents, temporary structures that had become permanent over 50 years. Infrastructure failing under the weight of too many people and too few resources. She had injected Suho's experimental treatment 2 hours earlier. So far, she felt fine, though the doctor had warned that side effects might not appear immediately. Hyjin had argued against this plan until the very end, but finally accepted that Jiwan's mind was made up. Now she sat in the shuttle beside the ambassador, armed with every piece of diplomatic and cultural information they had on the Navari. The Navari themselves were humanoid, which made communication easier. They had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them stocky builds and strong limbs. Their skin ranged from deep blue to pale purple, and they possessed 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. When Jiwan's shuttle landed in what passed for the planet's capital, a delegation of Navari leaders was waiting. The leader introduced herself as Elder Boren. She was old by Navari standards. Her skin faded to almost white, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. Ambassador Gyuan of Earth, she said in accented but understandable Korean, translated through Gyuan's earpiece. The Council has sent many representatives over the years. They study us, take their samples, and leave. You are the first to actually come to the surface. I'm not here to study you, Gyuan replied. I'm here to save you. My species has developed a treatment for the plague. We need your help to manufacture and distribute it. Oren's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Hyjin had identified as skepticism. The Council has promised cures before. None worked. Why should we believe you are different? Because I'm standing here, Gyuan said simply. I've taken the treatment myself. I'm breathing your air, touching your ground, exposing myself to the same plague that's killing your people. If I'm wrong, I'll die alongside you. That's how sure I am that this will work." The Navari delegation exchanged looks, therefore eyes making the gesture somehow more dramatic. Elder Borin stepped closer, studying Giwan intently. "You would risk your life for people you don't know, for a species that means nothing to Earth." "You mean something to humanity?" Juan replied. "You mean that 3 billion lives are worth saving? You mean that when someone is suffering and we have the power to help, we do. That's what humans believe. That's what we're here to prove." Borin was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended her hand, and what the briefing materials had indicated was a Navari gesture of trust. Gi Wen took it without hesitation. "Show us this treatment," Borin said. "If it works, you will have our full cooperation." The next 2 weeks were a blur of desperate activity. Dr. Suho worked around the clock, refining his formula and testing it on Navari volunteers. The first results were promising. Patients who received the treatment showed immediate improvement. Their immune systems bolstered enough to fight off the plague. But the production capacity was still the limiting factor. Even with Navari fabrication facilities working at full speed, they could only produce enough treatment for a few million people per day. Engineer Dayan studied the problem from every angle, looking for ways to increase efficiency. She worked with Navari engineers, combining human and alien technology in ways that made both species uncomfortable but produced results. The fabrication systems ran so hot they required constant cooling. Several broke down entirely and had to be rebuilt from salvaged parts. Guan spent her time coordinating the effort, moving between the Nightingale in orbit and the surface camps. She met with Navari leaders, helped distribute treatments, and listened to stories of 50 years spent dying slowly. The Navari had maintained their hope against impossible odds, believing that someday someone would come to help them. Now that help had arrived, and they threw themselves into the work with desperate energy. But time was running out. 20 days into their month-long deadline, they had treated only half the population. The plague was still spreading, still killing those who hadn't yet received the treatment. Dayan reported that they had pushed the fabrication systems to their absolute limits. They couldn't produce any faster without risking catastrophic failures that night. Giwan sat in her quarters aboard the Nightingale, staring at population charts that showed millions still at risk. Haijin found her there, looking more exhausted than Jawan had ever seen her. "We're not going to make it at this rate," Haijin said quietly. 7 days left and still over 1 billion Navari untreated, Giwan replied. She had been running the numbers herself, hoping to find some error, some oversight that would change the math. But the numbers were merciless. "We need something dramatic, something that will deliver the treatment to everyone at once instead of one person at a time." "That's impossible," Haijin said. "The treatment needs to be injected or ingested. You can't just spread it through the air." Guan stood suddenly, an idea forming. "Why not?" "Because the compounds would break down in the atmosphere. They're not stable enough too." Haijin stopped, seeing the expression on Jiwan's face. "What are you thinking?" "The infinite horizon's faster than light drive," Guan said, moving to her computer. "When it engages, it creates a spatial distortion. Minho once told me they use that distortion to disperse chaff and confuse enemy sensors. What if we modified it?" Haijin's eyes widened. "You want to use the ship's FTL drive to disperse the treatment across the entire planet?" "Juan, that's insane. The energies involved would be enormous. One miscalculation, and you could sterilize the planet or tear it apart, and we could save 1 billion lives," Juan countered. She was already pulling up technical specifications. "Get Dayon and Minho. I need to know if this is possible." The engineering team worked for 3 straight days with almost no sleep. Dayon had declared the plan technically possible, but absolutely terrifying, which Jian took as qualified approval. The concept was simple in theory. Load the Infinite Horizon's dispersal systems with concentrated treatment compound. Position the ship in low orbit. And trigger a controlled faster-than-light pulse that would scatter the treatment across the entire atmosphere. The execution, however, was far more complex. Captain Minho stood on his bridge, reviewing the calculations for the 10th time. His engineering staff had checked and rechecked every number, but the margin for error was razor thin. If we get the power levels wrong by even 2%, we could kill everyone on the planet, he said quietly to Juan. And if we get them wrong in the other direction, the dispersal won't be strong enough to matter. We get exactly one attempt at this. I know, Juan replied. She stood beside him, watching Corva 3 rotate beneath them. 5 days remained in their deadline, and over 1 billion Navari still needed treatment. This was their only option. But we're out of time and alternatives. Dr. Suho says his calculations are solid. The treatment will remain stable during dispersal, and the Navari immune systems will absorb it through respiration. Suho's calculations are theoretical, Minho countered. He's never tested this delivery method. None of us have. We're guessing, Juan. Educated guessing, but still guessing. Then, we'd better guess right, Juan said. She placed a hand on his shoulder. I trust you, Minho. I trust your crew. If anyone can pull off something this insane, it's you. Right. We'll be ready in 6 hours. Make sure everyone on the surface knows to stay indoors during the dispersal. The atmospheric saturation will be intense. Giwan returned to the planet's surface to coordinate with Elder Borin and the other Navari leaders. The news of the plan spread quickly through the camps, generating reactions that ranged from hope to terror. Many Navari had survived 50 years by being cautious, by avoiding risks. Now the humans were asking them to trust in a plan that sounded like science fiction even to other humans. You're going to turn your ship into a giant medicine dispenser, Borin said, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly. And you believe this will work? I believe we're out of other options, Juan replied honestly. We've saved half your people through conventional treatment, but we can't reach the rest in time. This is the only way. And if it fails, if your ship explodes or destroys our atmosphere, then I'll die with you, Giwan said. I'm staying on the surface during the dispersal. If something goes wrong, I won't be running to orbit to save myself. Borin studied her for a long moment. Over the past 3 weeks, the Navari elder had come to respect this strange human who had risked everything for people she'd never met. Your species is either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. Can't it be both? Giwan asked with a slight smile. 6 hours later, Giwan stood in the central square of the Navari capital, surrounded by thousands of refugees who had gathered to watch the sky. The infinite horizon was visible as a bright point of light in the early evening sky, moving into position. Every Navari who could receive treatment through conventional means had already done so. Everyone who remained was counting on this desperate gambit to save their lives. Hyjin stood beside Juwan, her datapad showing real-time telemetry from the ship. Minho reports all systems ready. Dispersal tanks are loaded. FTL drive is charging. They're committed now. Even if they wanted to abort, the drive cycle has to complete. Then we wait, Juwan said, keeping her voice calm even as her heart raced. She had made many difficult decisions in her career, but none that risked so many lives on such uncertain odds. If this failed, humanity's first major act in the galactic community would be a catastrophic disaster. Earth would become a cautionary tale, not a partner. The light in the sky grew brighter as the infinite horizon's drive reached full power. Minho's voice came through Giwan's earpiece, initiating dispersal in 30 seconds. All personnel should move to covered areas now. Juwan and the others retreated into nearby buildings, watching through windows as the sky itself seemed to shimmer. The infinite horizon's pulse released, and for a brief moment, the entire atmosphere glowed with a soft blue light. The treatment compound spread like ethereal clouds carried by atmospheric currents to every corner of the planet. It lasted less than a minute, then faded, leaving the sky looking strangely clean and clear. Did it work? Someone asked in the silence that followed. Dr. Suho's voice came through the communication channel, barely contained excitement evident in his tone. Atmospheric sensors show successful dispersal. The compound is stable and at effective concentrations across 98% of the planet. Now we wait to see if the Navari immune systems respond as predicted. They didn't have to wait long. Within hours, reports started coming in from camps across Corva 3. Patients who had been dying that morning were showing improvement. The plague symptoms were receding. Children who hadn't had the strength to stand were playing again. The treatment was working on a planetary scale. 3 days later, with 2 days remaining in their deadline, Dr. Suho declared the mission a success. 96% of the Navari population showed complete recovery. The remaining 4% would require additional treatment, but they were stable and no longer in immediate danger. Against all odds, humanity had saved 3 billion lives in less than 1 month. The journey back to the Galactic Council Station felt different from the first time. The Infinite Horizon and Nightingale flew in formation. But now, they were accompanied by 3 Navari ships, representatives from a species that humanity had pulled back from the edge of extinction. Elder Boren herself had insisted on coming, determined to speak before the Council on humanity's behalf. When they docked, Jiwan noticed the difference immediately. The same guide construct met them, but its tone was markedly more respectful. Other species watched from their docking platforms, but now their expressions showed curiosity rather than contempt. News of the Corveth's success had spread through the Council, and suddenly humanity was no longer a joke but a phenomenon to be studied and perhaps feared. The Grand Chamber felt smaller this time, or perhaps Giwan simply felt larger. She walked too. The supplicant's platform with Hyjin at her side, noting how the Council representatives shifted uncomfortably in their places. High Arbiter Velmuth's crystalline form pulsed with dim, uncertain light as it addressed her. Ambassador Jiwan, you have returned within the allotted time period? We have received reports from Corveth 3. The Navari plague has been ... contained. Not contained, Guan corrected, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Cured. 3 billion Navari are alive and healthy because humanity refused to accept that their situation was hopeless. War Matron Cross made a sound that Jiwan's translator identified as grudging respect. Your methods were reckless. You risked destroying the entire planet with your dispersal technique. Tst. We risked failure, Jiwan agreed. But doing nothing was guaranteed failure. The Council quarantined Corveth 50 years ago and declared the situation unsolvable. You were content to let the Navari die slowly rather than risk a bold solution. We were cautious, Sage Loomis interjected, its energy form flickering. We sought a perfect solution that would risk no additional lives. You sought to avoid responsibility, Guan said, her voice hardening. And while you debated and studied and played it safe, billions suffered. During our time on Corveth, Dr. Hyjin did some research into Council records. Would the Council like to hear what she found? High Arbiter Velmuth's lights pulsed rapidly. That is not necessary. We acknowledged that the Corvath situation was ... challenging. Corvath wasn't the only one, Hyjin said, stepping forward with her datapad. In the last 1,000 years, the Council has faced 17 similar crises. 17 situations declared unsolvable and subsequently quarantined or abandoned. The Navari are just the most recent example. The chamber erupted in voices, Council members shouting over each other. The smaller species, the vassals that Hyjin had identified, were the loudest. A representative from the Tavari species rose from their platform, their reptilian features twisted in anger. The Photari plague of 800 years ago? My species lost to colony worlds to that outbreak? The Council quarantined both planets and left millions to die. You said there was no solution. The Valthara asteroid crisis, another voice added. 15 settlements destroyed because the Council refused to attempt risky mining operations to divert the asteroids. The Krillian protein shortage. The Nexus radiation leak. The accusations piled on top of each other. Decades and centuries of frustrations boiling over. The 3 dominant powers tried to restore order, but for the first time in living memory, the vassal species were speaking up, demanding answers. Giwan stood quietly at the center of the storm, letting it play out. Finally, High Arbiter Velmuth's voice cut through the chaos, amplified to painful levels. Silence. The chamber fell quiet, though the tension remained thick. Velmuth's crystalline form seemed to dim as it addressed Jiwan directly. You have proven your point, human. Humanity succeeded where the Council failed. You have earned the recognition we promised. Earth will be granted full partnership status. No, Jiwan said calmly. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the chamber fixed on the human ambassador who had just refused the very thing she had come to claim. War Matrone Cross leaned forward. No. You dare refuse after demanding this very outcome? I refuse, because the offer is insufficient, Juan replied. She had thought long and hard about this moment during the journey back. Humanity doesn't want to join the Council as it currently exists. We want to change it. We propose a complete reformation of Council governance. This is outrageous, Velmuth said, but its voice lacked conviction. The crystalline being could see where this was heading. Here are humanity's terms, Giwan continued, her voice clear and strong. First, all vassal species receive full voting rights equal to the dominant powers. No more puppet representatives. No more economic coercion. Second, the Council will establish a rapid response force dedicated to solving the so-called unsolvable crises you've been ignoring. Humanity will lead this force, but any species is welcome to join. Third, the Council will commit to actual exploration and expansion rather than stagnant maintenance of the status quo. You're demanding we restructure 12,000 years of tradition, Sage Loomis said, its energy form glowing with what might have been outrage, or perhaps admiration. On what authority? On the authority of 3 billion Navari lives, Elder Boren said, speaking for the first time. She had moved to stand beside Jiwan on the platform. The humans saved my people when you had abandoned us. They took risks you wouldn't take, tried solutions you wouldn't consider, and succeeded where you failed. If that doesn't earn them the right to demand change, nothing does. The Tyvari representative stood again. My species supports the human proposal. We vote in favor of Council reformation. As do we, another vassal species called out. And we, one by one, the smaller Council members declared their support. The 3 dominant powers watched as their carefully maintained control crumbled. They could refuse, could try to maintain the old order through force or economic pressure. But doing so would fracture the Council entirely. Even they could see that some change was inevitable. High Arbiter Velmuth S. lights pulsed in a pattern that Giwan had learned meant resignation. Very well. The Council will vote on the human proposal. All species with 1 vote, as humanity has demanded. The vote was swift and decisive. 14 species supported reformation. Only the 3 dominant powers voted against, and their opposition was noted and overruled. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would operate under new rules. And those rules had been dictated by the newest member rather than the oldest. Afterward, as Jiwan prepared to leave the Council station and return to Earth, Sage Loomis approached her privately. Its energy form cast strange shadows in the corridor. You have changed everything, Ambassador Juwan. The Council will never be the same. That was the point, Juwan replied. Some of us are grateful, Loomis admitted. We had grown comfortable, complacent. We needed someone to remind us that comfort is not the same as progress. But others will resent you for this. You have made enemies among the powerful. I made enemies the moment I challenged your assumptions about humanity, Guan said. But I also made allies among those you had suppressed. The future will be decided by which group proves stronger. 2 weeks later, Juan stood on Earth watching news broadcasts of the celebrations that had erupted worldwide. Humanity had gone from unknown outsiders to galactic game-changers in less than 2 months. Captain Minho had been promoted and given command of the new rapid response fleet. Dr. Suho was being hailed as a genius. Engineer Dayon was already working on new projects, combining human and alien technology in ways that neither species had imagined. Hajin found Giwan on the observation deck of the diplomatic compound, looking up at the stars. 37 species have already requested human assistance with various challenges, she reported. The Council Reformation Committee wants you to chair it. And the Navari have offered Earth a formal alliance, their first with any species in over a century. And the 3 dominant powers? Giwan asked. Quiet. For now. But they're watching us very carefully. Ijin paused. You really did it. You took humanity from being mocked to being respected in 1 month. No, Giwan said, shaking her head. We did it together. Every person who volunteered for Corveth, every engineer who pushed past exhaustion, every Navari who trusted us when they had no reason to. That's what humanity is. Not one person, but all of us working together towards something better. That's what the council forgot, Haijin said quietly. That's what we'll remind them, Jiwan replied, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, among those distant lights, were 17 civilizations that had just learned a critical lesson. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be quite the same.